Thanks very much. I'd now like to invite our panelists to come on stage for our next conversation, Renewable Cities, Inclusive Cities. And it's my pleasure to welcome Max Levitzke, Director for Green Workforce for Solar One, a not-for-profit that delivers education and training, helping individuals and communities to become more sustainable and resilient. And it's my pleasure to introduce Mayor Aboutaleb of Rotterdam and Mayor Williams of Tshwane. Please. I don't need my clicker anymore. Wonderful. This conversation is an opportunity to hear more about where I left off, the fantastic examples of action that have already been taken on the ground in cities and by cities and by other organizations to really lead a clean energy transition. And as I said, this is my favorite part because as someone who has to deal with the depressing climate data most of the time, really the hearing about the examples and the action that's taken by cities and others is the thing that gives me most motivation and I think us most hope at C40. So thank you so much for being here today, but thank you more for all of the work that you do the rest of the time. And I'd like to start, if I may, by a question to you, Mayor Williams. What does accelerating the energy transition mean for a city like Tshwane?
Well, a few months ago, we adopted what is known as Climate Action Plan, and it's for the city to work towards this energy smart and is at the forefront of what we call just energy transition, meaning that everyone will have access to reliable, affordable, and sustainable energy. But I just need to make it clear, when you speak about just energy, you can't move from a state where you use pollutants like coal to produce energy and then move to a perfect state where you now use clean energy. There's going to be a transition, and transition means you might have an intermediate phase, like, for example, using natural gas. Because from our perspective, City of Tshwane, a large part of our revenue is generated from reselling electricity that is supplied by a state-owned enterprise. And 90% of the energy that they generate from coal-fired power stations. So we can't just say we're going to give up on this revenue and we're going to adopt clean energy. And if you look at the tariffs that's offered to cities by independent power producers, producing energy from solar or wind it's much higher. So it means that the city will then have reduced revenue. So it's fine that you can have reliable energy, but the problem is it will not be affordable. So you can't go from one state directly over to the next state. For me, just energy means just energy transition means you have another stop along the way where you have to use something else. So we also have introduced other programs, like we've got a bus rapid transport system, and 30% of our buses use CNG compressed natural gas. And we're also speaking to the Development Bank of South Africa so that the rest of our fleet will then have electrification, and we will no longer use diesel for the rest of the fleet. And then we also have 2 coal-fired power stations that the city owns, but these power stations haven't been running for the past 10 years. But that also means we've got an extensive grid because the city is quite big, 6,300 square kilometers. So we can repurpose the grid for the use of clean energy like solar and also biogas, for example, instead of using natural gas. And furthermore, what we've done as a city, we passed a green building law to reduce harmful emissions from the buildings in terms of our built environment, and also to make sure that current buildings have a retrofitment for them to reduce energy consumption. So those are the things that we've implemented in the meanwhile.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for kicking us off by talking so frankly about the challenges. And I think one of the things that we looked at in our research was the different transition pathways that different cities would have to take. But what we found was the risk of investing in a transition fuel is there's a huge risk of stranded assets. So we should talk more. Okay, I'm going to go to the next question for Mayor Aboutaleb. And I wanted to ask, in the context of rising energy prices in Europe, how are you leveraging the energy transition in your city to decarbonize energy and at the same time shelter citizens from rising prices and energy poverty?
Yeah. Good afternoon. The biggest mistake I think we can do is that say, well, confronting with a higher price for energy will stop the transition. That will be stupid and that will be not wise. So we don't do that. But we have to cope with the urgent, I should say, acute problem of today, because citizens are coping with the higher energy prices. The price per cubic meter gas is tripled, and for electricity also 2.5 times as it used to be. So it was wise for the European Commission and the Dutch government to put a maximum price on it and to dictate that. We have by law the space to do that. And that means that if the market price, let me say there is not really a market for energy nowadays in Europe. If the prices are doing this, then the market must intervene. That's the government, and we do that. So that's really important to maximize the price, to bring stability in the households, and at the same time to give people subsidies for bringing solar systems on the roof, insulating their own houses, and to be aware when you use energy. Let me tell you my personal story. I have an app on which I can monitor my energy consumption. And what I did recently was insulating my floor. I have a very old house built in 1907, so little facilities to insulate the system. The windows and the roof. I see every day that my energy consumption, since I did that small investment of $3,000, is 2/3. So I save 2/3 of energy by doing this. So we stimulate people to invest, and we get them subsidies to invest in insulating their own houses. The lower your income, the more money you get. But this shows another thing, another lesson, that we, the civilized part of the world, and allow me to be political, the civilized part of the world have been trusting a sleeping bear in Russia, thinking that the ideological differences will disappear the moment we enhance international trade, be part of the big community that is better for everyone. I have been traveling the world for my port and for my city to work on trade and relations. Everywhere in the world, I succeeded in shaking hands and bringing friendship. Not in Russia. I did not succeed in Russia. Even when I visited the governor of St. Petersburg, I brought the president with me, and at the entrance, they bought the president a room to scan it before giving it me back to give it together to the governor. They say something about trust. And we've been trusting that system for long, and we have been naive, politically naive, to trust that, and not underlining and not accepting and not being aware probably that part of the world are using energy as part of an ideological agenda for geopolitical reasons. Back to the issue, what learns that me, that is we have to accelerate our energy transition, not stop it, but accelerate that to reduce the transition time. Probably it's 25, 30 years. That is according to the scientific findings of the World Energy Agency in Paris. They do the math and expect that the transition will be 25, 30 years from fossil to complete renewables. I would be really happy to see whether we can succeed in doing that in 15 years. But then we should not forget the agenda of the young lady from Kampala, who was speaking this morning, that we need also an international effort to help these countries to speed up their own processes, because it's right. Part of the story is truth. In the north, we have responsibility for the mess we created in south. Thank you, young lady from Kampala. I think she's sitting over there. It was a great story.
Thank you. And I think you touched upon a number of things that kind of came up in our research around the fair share approach we need to take to transitions, the responsibility that we need to assign to sort of certain cities. And it was interesting that both of you talked about energy efficiency and the huge part that energy efficiency has to play in the transition. Thank you very much. Max, I'd like to come to you now. Can you tell us a bit about how distributed renewable energy technologies open new possibilities to create more inclusive communities and more inclusive cities?
First, thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. And in regards to that question, as we think about the standard fossil fuel powered plants that have given us all energy for hundreds of years now, and we make the shift into newer energy resources such as solar, wind, battery backup systems, each of these different sectors are creating their own specific niche of jobs, which each contain their own skill sets that may not have been relevant to previous industries. With these new skills require a well-trained workforce, as well as people who are able to fulfill those jobs. And thinking about New York City, where I'm from, and its role in all this, with the COVID-19 pandemic, it really had an outshined effect on disproportionate communities. And people who were unable to work remotely really felt a lot of the effects of COVID much more than those who were. And they experienced, greater risks to their health, greater joblessness in many cases. At the same time the pandemic was starting, New York City and New York State, before it, each were passing landmark climate legislation acts with very high carbon reduction targets. And more recently this summer, the United States as a whole passed federal legislation, the Inflation Reduction Act, which was, again, a landmark piece of law that is going to put the United States in a better direction it's ever been. With all these carbon reduction targets and the amount of carbon emissions that need to be reduced, it simply cannot be done without a workforce that is trained and able to do the boots on the ground work. And that's where the organization I work with, Solar One, comes in. We are a nonprofit based in New York City, and we provide workforce development programs in partnership with other organizations across the city to train and unemployed folks for these types of jobs. We train people in green construction, energy efficient building operations and maintenance, high efficiency HVAC and heat pump installation, and thinking of building electrification and how it fits into all this. That is going to be crucial to New York's movement in the future as we think about reducing our energy usage. And getting back to the pandemic, and also I want to mention environmental justice and how that fits into all this. Mm-hmm. If we think of shifting from fossil fuel power to distributed renewable energy, historically marginalized communities are the ones that have been living near fossil fuel power plants, and they have experienced health issues, have been forced to have dirty water, dirty air. We need to think of these communities and how we can incorporate them into some of these job opportunities that tie into this, it's an energy revolution, but it really is a job revolution at the same time. Yeah. And it is critical to think of both simultaneously.
Great, thank you very much. And I mean, talking about the kind of an energy transition, but also a job opportunity at the same time, I'll come back to you, Mayor Aboutaleb, if I may. As a mayor of a port city and innovation hub, how do you see the role of renewable energy in driving industrial and job opportunities?
The book, it's Economy Stupid. If you don't know it, please buy it. And I tend to add one word to the title. It's the green economy stupid. I'm mayor for 14 years, and we have the largest port in the Western Hemisphere. It's there where 150,000 people are working every day. And the number of people connected with the port economy is 500,000. Transports, logistics, whatever. And I see if this is the X timetable, this is the Y, the number of jobs, I see the number of jobs declining for obvious reasons. 10 years ago, we had 8 persons to deal with 1 crane in the port. And nowadays, full automated terminals. 1 person in an air-conditioned room, nobody in the crane. 2 monitors, a cup of coffee, 2 joysticks, monitoring the whole thing. And if needed, a drone. Fascinating. So we lose a lot of working opportunities. Happy enough, the port of Rotterdam is big. So if you lose 50 jobs, there is another employee who needs 40, another one who needs 10. And the Port Authority, that is the city of Rotterdam, plays a role in matching these jobs. But in fact, the only way to create new jobs is to innovate. So if this is, again, the timetable, and this is the Y, the number of jobs, the declining line is this, and innovation is doing this. It's there where the 2 lines are crossing. Going to the X angle, it's there where we define the transition time. And the only way to reduce the transition time is to invest in the new technology. How we do that? Thousands of windmills in the North Sea. Thousands onshore. This stuff needs to be fabricated. You need to bring it there, to fix it, to make it work, to lay down the cables, to connect that with the grid onshore. And all this stuff needs to be maintained once in 6 months, to bring the windmills onshore, maintain them, bringing them back. Did you count how many jobs there are? More than we lose. And I think that is what I call, it's the new economy, it's stupid. If people in powerful positions are that conservative and saying, we're not a move towards that innovation because we lost job, that is a stupid thing. You have to move towards the new economy to create new jobs, to compensate the jobs you lose. And then we come to the story of my neighbor. My concern is, do we will have enough skilled labor? And that's a big issue, not only in my city, also in other cities in the world. And I'm not talking about engineers with university skills. I'm talking about well-trained, vocational training, boys and girls dealing with all these transformations. And that will be an endeavor for all of us to educate youngsters in this domain.
Thank you. I think it's fantastic hearing both times you've talked about the need to respond to this crisis by accelerating renewables, not moving away from them. And that absolutely chimes with the message from our research. So it's great to hear you say that. In terms of the need for upskilling, Max, if we can come back to you briefly, if I may ask you just to sort of comment. You already talked a bit about training and reskilling, but is there anything you want to add in terms of what we've heard from Mayor Aboutaleb?
Sure. As far as how it's done, I can at least say what our organization does that's been very successful. So in addition to the workforce development training programs, we also provide community solar benefits to New Yorkers from low to moderate income communities. We provide youth education all across the city in all 5 boroughs. And the only way this is done is our reliance on strong strategic partnerships with local community organizations. These are groups that have their ear to the ground and really know the residents in their specific zip codes one-on-one. And by leveraging each of our core competencies, they're able to engage the most micro-local residents possible and connect them to opportunities such as what Solar One provides. And it really helps build this relationship and get us closer to these climate goals that we're talking about.
Okay, so providing the right training, but also making sure it's done in an incredibly inclusive, community-engaged way is important. Okay, you're nodding, so I'm getting it right. All right, I'd like to just come back to you, Mayor Williams, for our last question, and I think it's the right one to end on. How important are renewable energy solutions to improve the livelihood of your residents?
Look, for us, the science is quite clear. The harm caused by burning fossil fuel and the benefits by using renewable energy. I mean, the numbers are there. about global warming, about the air pollution causing premature deaths of over 13,000 during a year in South Africa, for example. Renewable energy can create green jobs. In my city, for example, we've got 75% unemployment rate for the youth, and that's youth unemployment. So creating jobs using renewable energy can amount to about 100,000 jobs by 2030 across all South African cities. So the benefits are clear, and we're definitely moving in that direction.
Fantastic. I think that's a perfect note to end on. Thank you so much to our three panelists. It's been amazing to hear about the work that you're all doing. And as I said when I introduced you, I'd like to not just thank you for your time today, but really to thank you for all the work that you're doing outside of today, because that's what gives us all hope for the future. So thank you very much.